What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Scene Invaders podcast channel. I am Chad, one of the Scene Invaders, and I'm gonna go this video alone, guys. I'm kind of the resident horror guy amongst the three of us, and ever since I saw Speak No Evil, the remake of this, on Thursday, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it and the wild differences in both tone and final act between the two. And it's kind of fascinating to me. I think we all know that Blumhouse this year has their output's been bleak, guys. Okay, not a good movie yet. Night Swim, Imaginary, fucking Afraid. Holy shit. Ugh. And my hopes for this absolutely weren't high, and especially as someone who did like the original, and have been force fed the trailer to this remake as much as I have been. I don't really watch trailers. I try to avoid them as much as I possibly can. When I go to the movies, I take noise canceling earbuds and I keep that shit on, like through trailers and stuff, and I Twitter on my phone and whatever, because I am tired of having movies spoiled for me. And Blumhouse, I guess through some kind of research that they did, has discovered that people actually like that for whatever the fuck reason. I cannot relate to those people. They, I guess, did some kind of a study where when they spell every fucking thing out in the trailer for you, more people are going to go see it for whatever reason. So yeah, I can't relate to that. I don't understand that mentality at all. Yeah, movies are expensive, and I guess you kind of want to get you kind of want to know what you're getting into. But I mean, do you want like giant plot points fucking spoiled in your trailer? Fuck, I don't get it. But anyway, so yeah, I did actually, though, in saying that, watch the trailer for this. I had seen the original, so I wasn't scared about like giant plot points being spoiled for me. And I just was so curious because the original is so incredibly bleak and so insanely dark that I was like, that's not going to be palatable for most of like US, like especially just general movie going audience. And this is a Blumhouse movie and they want general moviegoers. So I just was curious as to what they were going to do with this. The trailer, it really didn't do much for me, guys. I wasn't that excited by it. And again, I was honestly just sick to death of it. It played before everything, even though if I wasn't listening because I had earbuds in, I was like, fuck, this shit is playing before. Literally, I mean, I feel like it played before fucking Inside Out 2, for God's sake. Like, I mean, it was, you couldn't escape it. And the one glimmer of hope that I had here was James McAvoy. I really took notice of him in Split. He's asked to do so much in that movie. And for me, and in my opinion, I think he really pulls it off. And that was an incredibly difficult role that really made me sit up and like take notice of him. So he was my glimmer of hope going into this because I knew the character he was going to be playing from the original. And I was curious to see how he would handle it. And I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of the way, guys. I like the original very much. And I also really like this version of it. The tone here is wildly different than the original. And the third act is wildly, wildly different. But I did sort of expect that going in. It went in a direction that I certainly wasn't surprised by. Again, we're making this for American audiences, and that original movie, even though it is only 2 years old, and yeah, technically a foreign film, but I mean, God, 75% of it's in English. And I'd rather sort of see something like that be propped up than just remade or regurgitated for an American audience. I get why most general movie going Americans wouldn't palate this. It's incredibly bleak, wildly dark, and it just left me I watched it again today for the second time. I watched it when it came out, and then I watched the original today for the second time, and I hung my head at the end, guys. I was just like, man. I remembered it was bleak, it was dark, and it definitely lived up to that. The biggest difference between the two of these here is that this somehow takes one of the darker things that I've seen in recent memory and makes it a crowd pleaser. It feels so odd to say that. And just saying that like out of my mouth makes me feel like I want to just not like the new movie. But I did, man. It's entertaining as fuck. The original is not exactly what I would call entertaining. It's a difficult watch. It is troubling. And like I said, like when I watched it earlier, I was left with my head hanging like, fuck. That shit really goes hard. And this takes the same concept, the same story, and for really a lot of the film, like almost the exact same, like scripting in a sense, and beats up until a certain point when it decides to switch some things around a bit to, like I said, make something a bit more crowd pleasing. So the setup here, two families are on vacation, and they're of similar age. They have kids that are around the same age, and they're at a resort type property where you're having like these big group dinners with tons of people you don't really know. So I think as humans, we kind of naturally gravitate toward the people that we have a good conversation with, find sort of a rhythm with, a vibe with, and they end up spending a lot of this vacation hanging out together. So at the end of this, one family invites the other to come and stay at their home in the country for several days and let the kids play. We can have some adult time, drink some wine, cook some dinner, take some walks out in the country, all that kind of stuff. And I think this setup actually really works for the most part. Yeah, maybe in this day and age, people are a little bit more hesitant about actually like doing things with other people or like meeting people in general, but it still does actually work here. And then what ensues from there is just this sort of downward spiral of things that I'm not going to spoil here. That's kind of where I'm going to leave the setup and sort of what these movies are about. I am going to spoil both of them, but I'm going to do it with a warning. Because if you haven't seen the trailer, I recommend not doing it. If you like horror, if you like thrillers, I do recommend both versions of this. I think the new version is a much easier recommend to a much broader audience. But if you like super fucked up, dark, depressing shit, the original is also a highly recommend for me. I'm a person who loves feeling miserable after a movie, so I will say that the original does take the slight edge here for me. But what I thought was funny was after I got out of the theater, I was talking with a friend who I went to see it with, and we were discussing it. I was like, shit, I wonder if I rated the original on Letterboxd. I couldn't remember if I had Letterboxd at the time or not. Turns out I did, and I did. And I rated both of these movies the same score. And was honestly like really, really surprised to see that when I left, because like I said, they are so wildly different. So we're going to spoil it now, guys. So if you haven't seen either of these versions, absolutely, with caution, watch the original. Or in my opinion, I think the remake has a lot of merit too and is worth your time as well. So, knowing how dark the original one goes, up to a certain point in this movie, it's almost like a beat for beat remake in a lot of ways. The tone is a lot different here, even though they're working, it seems, with much of the same script. I think this film, the new version of the fucking new Speak No Evil, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. That one. This shit's hard to talk about. Everything's named the same and blah, 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 blah. And I'm trying to wing this shit and I don't have notes and yeah. So bear with me, guys. But yeah, this one, the tone here is, I think, wildly different than the original. The other one has this sort of like somber, sad, grayish tone that sort of hangs over everything in a way. Even during moments that aren't difficult or hard to process or any of that, there's just this sort of like it's a more somber affair. And even though they're working with much the same script here, at least up until a certain point, this one almost kind of leans into the territory of like black comedy and like a dark, somewhat comedic thriller, because in both films here, you watch a couple go to another couple's house in the country for a long weekend. Red flags fucking abound, bitch. Red flags fucking everywhere. And they start pretty quick and they start pretty early. But again, where do you draw the line on like politeness, being polite with someone? You're in someone else's home. Nothing here is like that insane to where you're worried, at least not at first. And it becomes sort of like a commentary on politeness. And I think in the original movie, this is something I learned after seeing it. I am an American, guys, so I don't know Danish culture, but I think the original was very much commentary on the Danish culture and the Danish people just being entirely too nice. But as an American going into that original movie and seeing this one, unless you know that culture, I don't think that that is something that would land with you. So that's where the same flaws present themselves from both movies for me. Again, as an American who doesn't know that culture, you watch this family be uncomfortable and for things for them to become increasingly uncomfortable that like it becomes eye-rolling, guys. And I talked about Trap earlier, not that long ago, and I hated that fucking movie because it's fucking stupid and nobody ever does anything that makes any sense. And I think you could sort of lob that complaint at these movies as well. Again, unless you know the Danish culture of the original, or especially kind of really more at this remake, you're just sitting there asking yourself, like, why the fuck are you like staying in this situation that is clearly something ain't fucking right, bitch? And you're just like worried about being like too polite or like saying anything to like fucking get in your fucking car. Fuck that bunny, bitch. We'll talk about that bunny. And let's get the fuck out of here. We don't have time for this. Life is short. And yeah, this is suddenly not a good fucking time anymore. And that same complaint is the same for me. And I think that's why I logged both of these at the same score for me. The original and this one, both Letterboxd is a 5-star system, and I did 3.5 out of 5 stars. In that, like, 1.5 missing stars is really just sort of like having to accept the behaviors of people that you just really can't relate to. I could not relate to the visiting couple in either of these movies because I would have been the fuck out. I'm gone, bitch. I don't have time. I got a fucking child here with me. Absolutely fucking not. No. And I don't care whatever fucking like story you have to tell me or some bullshit that you're going to try to like win me back over with or whatever. Like, I'm a polite person. I don't exactly love conflict, but absolutely not here. And it strains credibility in a pretty major way, in my opinion. And had they found a different way to keep the visiting couple there other than their nonstop fucking ridiculous decisions, then I would have way, way less problems with this. Though I do like both movies, as I've said. So, the visiting couple has a daughter, and this is my biggest point of contention, especially with the remake. They handle it the same way. So, something happens. They find that their daughter has been taken into the bed of this couple that they're visiting with their son one night. And one of the parents wakes up to see this and is like, the fuck? And I mean, honestly, same. Bitch, that's my fucking child. Absolutely not. So that prompts them to get in the fucking car and leave kind of in the middle of the morning. Nobody's up yet. And they're like, we gonna bounce, bitch. And I could relate to that. I was like, let's fucking go. Let's get the fuck out of here. So in both movies, their daughter has this fucking stuffed bunny that it's her like comfort blanket. It's her thing that she needs to like get through it all. She's a bit younger in the first movie, so it makes some more sense there. But in the new one, she's almost fucking 12. And she has to have this bunny or like she's gonna scratch her skin off, which is how they treat it in the new one. She starts like so these motherfuckers, after they've left the fucking house, turn the car around because they have to go get this stuffed bunny for this child. And this is probably why I can't be a parent, because I would have been like, sorry girl, that bunny's gone forever. you're never going to see it again. And now it's time for you to just suck it the fuck up and you're going to figure it out. Tough love. This is how the real world works. But no. In the original one, they turn around to go and get it. Find that the bunny is actually like under the seat of the car. And in the new one, it wasn't under the seat of the car. They have to go and retrieve it from the house. And the couple wins them back, guys. And I sound like I'm shitting on this. I'm not. I like both of these movies, but this is my biggest point of contention with both of them because I cannot relate to this behavior. You saw your fucking child, in bed. In the original with a man who's naked, and in this one in a man who's like just in his underwear and shit. And you're gonna let these fucking hoes talk you back into like, oh, but this is why, and oh, sob story, and all this bullshit, and you're gonna fucking still stay there and continue your time visiting them? No, absolutely not. But because of that reason, in the original, you downward spiral into one of the bleakest things I've seen, like I said recently, and in this new one, you get taken now for a wildly entertaining, extremely Americanized version of that original movie. So as things play out, you find out in slightly different ways between the two movies that essentially this couple that they have gone to visit is meeting couples, just like the family who's visiting that have a small child, cutting the tongues out of them and keeping the children while they dispose of the previous one. It never really exactly explains why. I feel like it's either a sick game or they're trying to find like the perfect child for themselves or whatever. But that's kind of left up to you to sort of interpret exactly why they're doing this. And in the original, it's discovered one night the visiting father gets up and he sees a door ajar out on like a barn or like a little house outside the house. He goes in there and he discovers all of the suitcases, cameras, phones, pictures of previous couples who have visited, and it's pretty easy to put together that, yeah, when you see like pictures of two families with kids and the kid for one constantly is changing and you're seeing that motherfucker and like the previous one and all that kind of shit, pretty easy to put together. In this one, they do spell it out a little bit more. And the little boy of the family that they have gone to visit, who does not have a tongue, it has been cut out, is trying to communicate to this girl, the visiting girl, exactly what's happening. So they make their way into this area, sort of like secret, and he's showing her like the memorabilia that's been gathered from the families that they've killed and taken their children, and shows them the photo album full of photos of like, and I mean the little girl, like I said, she's almost 12, even though she's addicted to this fucking bunny, and I would have told that hoe to fucking leave it. She's able to put it together because it's easy to put together exactly what's going on. So what plays out from there are the family, regardless of how they found out, leaving this situation, or trying to leave this situation. And in the original, this goes in such a bleak, dark, insanely dark, I think, direction. When I finished it today, after having already seen it before and remembering how dark it was, I just hung my head, guys. It's just so incredibly like, it's just like pitch black dark. And what plays out there is that essentially the family has left the property, and they end up, of course, being found by the family. They have essentially no gas, and they end up getting their car stuck. And then you have to watch this young girl get her tongue cut out, and then watch the parents be literally stoned to death. They've just had their child taken from them, and now they've been asked to strip naked, and they get stoned and murdered and left for dead in the middle of nowhere. And this is the starkest difference between the two here, because in this new version, I think I've said Americanized before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm not really trying to mean that as a derogatory thing. That ending, with how dark it is, it would not sit well with American audiences. It definitely wouldn't gain word of mouth with most people. I'm someone who likes feeling miserable after a movie, so that actually really works for me, and that's why the original does take the slight edge here for me, because it leaves you feeling just absolutely hopeless and miserable. But here, as the family tries to escape, it becomes a really, truly genuine cat and mouse game between the family, the visiting family, and the family that they're visiting, James McAvoy's family. And James McAvoy in this just absolutely, I thought, was incredible. He, at all times, during the entirety of this thing, even when he's being charming, even when he's being friendly, even when he's likable, there is this element to him that he gives this character that is this ticking time bomb that is just waiting to go off. And you feel it. I felt it, at least. In the original, this role was not, it was just handled a little bit differently. It was much more subtle, and really no less frightening, I wouldn't say. In the end, the subtlety did sort of add to, like, it accumulated into something that became more frightening. Whereas I think James McAvoy here, because of his lack of subtlety, what came across as like unhinged and a bit frightening from the beginning. And I thought he absolutely just stole the fucking show here. And like I said, this becomes a cat and mouse game between these two families as one is trying to figure out how the fuck to get out of there while knowing what's going on here now, and play this other family to try to save their lives, their daughters' lives. And this goes in such a wildly different direction. Like I said, it becomes a crowd pleaser. It becomes sort of what you would expect here. The family fights. They put up a hell of a fight. They end up back in the house. They were never able to leave the property, so they end up back in the house, barricading themselves into it while they fight off the two adults of the family they're visiting, and then a friend of theirs who's coming to try to help them with this situation. And even in saying that, this honestly really worked for me. This movie relies on, like I said, you being able to accept character decisions that don't make any sense. But what happens is there this like switch, at least for me, flipped sort of partway through, where like I couldn't roll my eyes hard enough at some of this shit and what they're doing and the decisions that they're making. But what it gave to me was just such a wildly entertaining experience that I could not help but be won over by it. It won me over. The family, of course, emerges victorious because this is an American remake. We're not going to go as bleak as the Danish original. And to watch it all play out, and I mean, even honestly, I think you just kind of know where most of this is going regardless. But to see how it plays out and see how it handled here, and or how it's handled here, and even knowing like so many of the things that I did about the original, like I still found myself kind of on the edge of my seat here. This one, it's a slightly more intense and exciting version of that original because it's not concerned with being so dark and bleak. It's definitely still dark. It's definitely still fucked up what these people are doing to families and children, and they're taking them, and all of that is definitely not light subject matter. But it still just leaves you with this sort of like, I'm not really making this sound good, guys. Like, as I speak this, like, this doesn't sound like something that would appeal to me. So I'm like shocked that I'm sitting here saying that it does. But it leaves you with this sense of like wanting to stand up out of your seat and like cheer. Both times that I saw the original, my theater was, I would say, about half full. And this is the kind of movie, the remake of Speak No Evil, is the kind of movie that absolutely was built for seeing in a theater with a rowdy, loud, obnoxious crowd, and that adds to the movie as opposed to like detracting from it. My theater, both times, were quite vocal about this. You could hear people being like, because there are so many what the fuck decisions in it that you can't help but like throw your hands up sometimes and be like, bitch, what in the hell? Like, what are you doing? And there was a lot of that, but it really added to the fun here. This is a good, entertaining time. Is it thought provoking? No. Is it deep? No. The original one is much more thought provoking and deep and leaves a much, it resonates so much more and sticks with you more because of where it ends up than this one does. But this is a hell of a time at the movie theater. Like I said, with a rowdy, loud crowd. I tend to see movies like kind of in the middle of the day with not a ton of people, and that was the case both of these times. But still, my theater, I would say, was approaching about like half full. And I honestly, like after seeing it on Thursday, I thought about going back to one of the almost like sold out shows that night or Friday night because I really did want to experience this with just a full, packed crowd of people. I think these movies, I give, even though I've rated them the same, I'm giving the slight edge to the original for sure. I do think it is overall the better film, but I still leave them both at the same rating because I just didn't expect this, guys. I had no expectations. I had no idea I would have as much fun watching this as I did, and it just sounds so fucking bizarre to say that I had fun watching a remake of something so incredibly bleak and dark. But I think that while this was not necessary, this remake was unnecessary. And I'm not really against remakes, but I mean, fuck, this movie's 2 fucking years old, guys. Like, really? Like, do we really have to remake it like 2 years later? While it's unnecessary, I still think it kind of stands alongside the other one. And it didn't feel like a lazy remake to me. It felt like they were really trying to take this idea and this story and do something a bit different with it and take this concept and just turn it into something slightly different that in the end just really worked for me. I'm not sure how a lot of other people feel about this. I have a feeling that most people that probably go and see this haven't seen the original, so they don't have anything to compare it to. And I'm going to venture to guess that I think most people would walk away having a really good time with this movie. Yeah, it's flawed, it's got tons of problems, but if you're willing to overlook them, it's pure entertainment, and it's exciting entertainment at that, because even when you know sort of where things are going or how things are going to play out, there is just still this excitement that fills it, and a lot of it because of James McAvoy, that is just hard to not give yourself over to and give into. So I'm curious, guys, did you go see the Speak No Evil remake? And if so, did you see the original, and what are your thoughts here? It's just been something on my mind since I saw it, man. Like, I just can't believe I've not been able to stop thinking about it. And again, not because it's a deep experience, but because I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it, and with it being so different than what the original was. So it's just really, really kind of like bounced around in my brain. That's why I went to see it a second time today. Like I said, I had seen the original before when it came out. I saw the new one on Thursday. I knew I was going to rewatch the original before filming this video, so I wanted to make it a fair advantage and have seen both twice. And I don't regret it. They're both extremely well done. I think the original definitely is more of a horror film than this one is, whereas I would categorize this more as a thriller. Even though the script is 70% kind of the same, they just handle it in a very different way here that I thought was well done, and I'm happy to recommend it to people, guys. So thank you so much for checking back and coming back to the channel and listening to me talk about Speak No Evil. And I hope this wasn't confusing. I didn't want to take notes on this. I just wanted to come off the cuff and just sit and like talk for a minute and not have to edit a shit ton of stuff. I just wanted like a stream of consciousness, a flow, and hopefully that came across. So anyway, again, thanks guys, and I'll definitely talk to you soon. More horror movies are on the horizon, so